Welcome, Thomas.
Thanks for having me, Karen. I'm glad to be here.
I want to talk about today about heroism, and that wasn't where you started out in your life, but the fact that you are, with Hero Roundtable and with the work you're doing now with the Hero Imagination Project, it's
Mhm.
you bring so much to that space, and particularly with your warmth and beautiful personality and character. So, I think that even heroes need a hug, and
Well,
yeah.
thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
I
And
know.
yeah, I'll give them the hugs if they need them, if they want them, even if they don't want them. I'll still give them a hug.
What were you like as a kid? Like, were you super fascinated by superheroes, or how did
Um,
that?
Not particularly with superheroes. Like when I was a kid, I would watch like cartoons and stuff that had superheroes in them. I grew up in the 90s, so they were kind of all over the place. We had like the X-Men series and stuff like that. Um, I read a bunch, and I read a lot of Tolkien. When I was growing up, I was a big Lord of the Rings kid and the Hobbit kid. So maybe that, I'm not really sure. Um, Honestly, it all kind of feels random sometimes that I ended up in this space, but I'm here and I'm trying to do my best. But yeah, I was pretty quiet as a kid, um, which I suppose is kind of hard to believe for people that know me now because I'm really talkative. But um, but when I was a kid, I was really quiet. And yeah, we just sort of grew up in Michigan. I don't know. I think probably the reading was what got me into the idea of heroism and like the hero's journey and things like that.
Yeah, we often miss the hero's journey. Like, we see it and we feel it, and we take the journey with people, in these movies. But I don't think we actually, can articulate it, or can, you know, think it out and say,
Right,
yeah, that's actually happening. That's the hero's journey. But
right.
it's isn't it amazing though? At the end, we always we come out feeling like champions ourselves, even though even though we
That's so
weren't in
true.
it. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's very true. And it's super captivating. Like even when you're a little kid, all of those stories, they catch your attention and they resonate with people. And I think that's why that sort of like writing tool or whatever you would call it that the hero's journey is like has stuck in so many different stories for so many generations because
Mm,
like we do relate to it, like even if we don't realize directly why. It's like,
mm.
well, yeah, we might be listening to a story about Harry Potter or something like that, and it might seem really fantastic and unrealistic, but there are still elements of like what they're all going through that are like relatable to our lives and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
don't know. I just think it's interesting. I get fired up listening to that kind of stuff.
No, I think it's absolutely fascinating too. It also confirms, doesn't it, that within each of us there's a hero, and we get that a little bit confused sometimes. We kind of think, well, a hero has to have a cape and a mask, and we have to be out there, jumping into fires and saving people. But I'm a strong believer that a hero is somebody who, well, there's too, like, it's you do jump to action, you do spring into action
Right.
if there's something that we all say we're going to, and sometimes we don't. I want to ask you about that later too, but
Totally. Yeah,
um
absolutely.
there's also the hero that is the everyday just choosing to do better, choosing to do better for yourself, choosing to do better for the world, just choosing to be kind. I think there's
Right.
massive heroic action in that, just
Yeah,
itself.
absolutely. It's almost like being a hero in training. I feel like that's how they would phrase it in the organizations that I've helped with. It's like all of those small little things that you're doing throughout the day sort of help prime you to act in a situation where, someone may need help or something like that. And
Mm,
excuse me, we even say a lot of the times when we're talking to people about it, like, yeah, like we know a lot about heroism, or we know what we believe about heroism and everything like that. But like we hope that even if you've learned stuff from us, we hope you don't have to be one.
yeah,
Like we hope you don't have to like risk your life to help
yeah,
somebody or something like
yeah,
that. It's just a possibility that may arise at some point in your everyday life.
yeah.
So yeah, I guess being aware of like the situational boundaries and things like that helps make it easier to bypass them, and like doing those small acts of kindness and things like that every day, like that helps build empathy and things like that. And I like to think of empathy as like, I think about empathy a lot. I like to think of empathy as like a skill right? It's like a muscle or something like that. Like it's not something that you just have. Like some people are just very empathetic, but like it's not like if you're not super empathetic, you can never be that way.
Yeah.
It just takes practice, right? And
Yeah.
so like by finding those small little ways that to do nice things or to like be helpful or be like cheery or whatever, spread good energy, like that sort of you have to like connect with somebody in some way to do that, right? Like even if you're just holding the door for someone, like there's a moment there. um so yeah, I just think it's interesting, like it helps build that empathy, you're connecting with people and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I love too when connecting that, just going a little bit further to that, with the hugs, you being the chief hugger. And I mean, you've got a ton of other jobs to do that are more important. I don't know if they're more important, but one,
Who
one of the
knows?
one of the roles you take on is chief hugger. And I
That's
think that
true.
that's where the souls meet. Hugging is where the
Right.
souls meet. And I think that you I don't know whether it's building empathy or not, but you're certainly making a connection, that then encourages or opens the door to empathy, to further empathize with that person.
Right.
And I think it's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's a big thing. I put a lot of thought into the things that I do around the event, and the hugging is a big part of that because we try to, and you're familiar with this because you've been to many of our events and you're a big part of it. But for the listener who may not know, like at our events, the Hero Round Table, we try to build a real family atmosphere,
mm,
both for the speakers and the attendees.
yeah.
And early on in our experience, we were hearing a lot from the more professional speakers, because we do bring in a vast sort of variety of speakers. We bring in people who are maybe local and have never spoken publicly before, as well as people who might travel around the world speaking.
Mm,
So the speakers who really are more like, this is my job, I speak. We were getting a lot of feedback that this was sort of like a really fun event for them, that they
mm,
felt connected to the other speakers. It wasn't like they just showed up, went to their hotel room, went down to speak, and then went back to their hotel room, which I guess is the norm. I don't know. I've only ever run our events, so I don't know what the normal is. But with us, we like take everyone out to dinner, and like if people show up early, we'll like take them around, to Detroit or to the
mm,
park or to whatever, and try and build like that sort of communal feeling, I guess.
mm.
Um, so yeah, the hugs are a part of that, like welcome to the fam. And
Before you got into that, and you had you're reading your Tolkien books and your Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, I'm not really into superheroes particularly. And you're doing
you
and you're
nothing
doing
against
your
them.
you're doing your concreting, and
Hmm.
but then you got a back injury, and
I
that
did.
that turned out that, I don't know, you said you were selling candy or something. I'm not sure about that
It's
American
it's
statement, but then, and somehow this led to you meeting Matt Langdon, who is the
Mhm.
founder of Hero Roundtable. So how did that all eventuate?
Yeah, so I grew up doing asphalt and concrete. My dad owned an asphalt and concrete company for 53 years.
Wow.
Well, our family did. My brother and I owned it for the last 5 or 6, and my mom owned it prior to that, but it was started by my dad.
Yeah.
Um, and that was really cool. I mean, it was really tough. Because our dad was born in the 40s and raised in Oklahoma in like a mining and farming town. So he was very old school in like a work ethic sense.
Yeah.
So we just grew up working super hard. It was
Yeah.
crazy. Like anyone in Michigan, in southeastern Michigan, if you happen to be listening, if you ever saw two little kids like operating weirdly big machinery when you were driving around one day in the 90s and early 2000s, that was me and my brother. We learned how to run rollers when we were like 5, skid steers, which is another piece of equipment, which when you're really little, like they tend to like lose their footing and jump back and forth, and you're
Right.
like in this cage. And when you're little, it like the seatbelt and the little protector bar, it's way too big. Like it doesn't help at all. So you're kind of like a marble in like a coffee can, just like getting banged around. It was wild, honestly, but it was really cool. And we worked with loads of great guys growing up, and loads of people from like all over southeastern Michigan. It was great. Um, Unfortunately, it led to a back injury when I was about 18, and it took me out of the asphalt business for like 2 years. It was a pretty bad one. Well, it just kept lingering,
Mm,
and like I had to let it get better, or else if I went back into labor, like I still
mm,
have back pain sometimes, but it would have been way worse.
yeah.
um so so yeah, so I was like, shoot, I need to like have a job though. I don't have a job. I've never not had a job, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was in a community college, like a local, not quite a university, but similar, working for our family's company. My younger brother was still in high school, and he would carpool with people. We would meet in Brighton, where you've been in Michigan,
Yeah.
and we would meet at this candy store called Oh My Lolly. And they make hard candy and lollipops right in front of the customer. It's really cool. It's a super colorful store.
I've
Um,
been there. I've
yeah,
been.
it's amazing, isn't it?
It's
It's so much
amazing,
fun,
that store.
honestly. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
like the most fun job I've ever had. And
Yeah.
we would just make candy, and everyone that we worked with had a great attitude. And it was just a really fun time and place to work. And it was great. And so Matt, who is from Australia originally, and lives there now, he was in a period of his life where he was living in Michigan in Brighton. And he and his amazing wife Karen had just had their just as amazing daughter Vienna. And she was just a little, like the size of like a little rugby ball or football or something, just a little infant. And they would always be walking around town, and they would kind of go into every shop and like chat with everybody. That's just what Matt's like. He's like a super, like, let's see
Yeah.
what's going on kind of guy,
Yeah.
which is rad. And so Matt would always come in, and I thought Matt didn't like me for like the longest time. And I'm like used to dry senses of humor. Like my mom is from England, and
Yeah.
we watched all kinds of English shows growing up and stuff. But Matt has like an extraordinarily dry sense of humor, and he's like so like dry when he says the things that he's saying. And so for a while I was like, man, this guy just, I don't think he like, because I have a really big personality. So like sometimes I'm just a little bit much for people, like that's
Yeah.
fine. So I was like, I don't think Langdon likes me very much. And then one day he walked in, and I was wearing a Liverpool jersey because that's where my mom is from. We're all about Liverpool in our house. And Matt was like, "Why are you wearing a Liverpool jersey?" And I was like, Why wouldn't I be?" I was like ready for the argument. And he was like, "Oh no, like I'm a Liverpool fan. Like when I was getting into soccer, like the best Australian, Harry Kewell, shouts out Harry Kewell, played for Liverpool."
Yeah.
And so that became his club. So then we kind of had this thing to talk about. And then we both found out that we were really into traveling, and we'd been to Europe a bunch of times and to the same places. And this is over the course of a couple of years. And then I was in Europe for 5 out of 6 months in 2012. And Matt and Karen in Vienna were also there. So they like randomly shot me a message, and they were like, "Hey, are you close to Lyon, France?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm like a 30-minute bus ride from there." Super random. And he was like, "Cool, we're gonna be in town. You want to hang out?" So we like met up. Later on in my life, I lived in Lyon, which was wild because I'd like walk by that place where we hung out, and I'd be like, "Oh, this is where I hung out with Langdon and Karen in Vienna. It was cool." So yeah, so we just kind of became buddies, like, just kind of through me selling candy and him coming in and buying candy. And then his family moved back to Australia, which was a really sad day for Livingston County, Michigan. Honestly, we lost a lot of like the people that I liked that day, and but it was cool for them. And then I hadn't heard from Matt. I was sort of like, well, guess I'll never see them again, and which was completely wrong.
Yeah.
And he messaged me one day, and he was like, "Hey, I'm doing this event in Flint, Michigan, which is a great city that's been through loads of hardship, and it sucks. Like they've caught hell these last few years. It's not cool." So he's like, "I'm doing an event in Flint, and like, would you like to help? Like, you're really enthusiastic. Would you like to come up and just volunteer?" And I was like, "Sure, man. I'll come up and like hang out with you. Like, it'll be cool." And it was a great event. Honestly, it was at a venue called the Whiting, in Flint. Like I said, we had like, there must have been at least 600, 700 people there. It's a huge venue. We had great speakers. That was where I met Dave Rendell. It was where I met Phil Zimbardo. It was where I met Edith Eager. It was just a really, like, I was sort of blown away. I was like, wow, I can't believe this dude that I just talk about soccer with just did this event. Like, this is crazy. So I left, and I was like, "Hey man, if you need help in the future, let me know." And I've just been on the team ever since. It's really been amazing. But
Mm.
yeah, the way that all started was through me getting a back injury and having to sell candy so I could rest and heal.
With doing the Hero Roundtable, you have listened to and been around a ton of speakers, like a ton of speakers, and not just talking about, not just speaking about any old speaking topic. They've been talking about the actions that they've taken, and they're not proclaiming themselves as heroes. They're just ordinary people who have, I guess, taken, stepped up to make a difference in the world. And so you've sort of met and mingled with and listened to and been a part of all these speakers. Can you identify a quality or a characteristic that all these people share?
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so off the top of my head, I would probably go with empathy.
Yeah.
Again, it's something that I've just noticed, that, a lot of our speakers are just, they come across as being very genuine as
Mm.
well. Um, but yeah, very, very kind, sort of genuine, and they always seem very interested in the other speakers as well. They do things like, these are people that have felt a motivation and chose not to waste it,
Yeah.
a lot of the time. And like, where they might have an idea or see a problem or experience something, or witness someone experience something, and they're like, okay, well, I want to do something about this, which is rad. Loads of us have those thoughts, but there's a difference between being like, I could really probably do something about this, and actually doing something about it.
You actually do believe that we're all
Allegedly.
allegedly we're all capable of heroic action, and you've just started to touch on this, but you think we're all capable of it, but we don't all take action. So what are your thoughts on why we say we will, but we don't? What are your thoughts about why we don't jump in when we always have said we would?
Like, people want to do the right thing, you know what I mean? And I think it's pretty recognizable that, maybe you see a video, and you're thinking to yourself, like, why didn't someone do something? The right thing to do is to do something.
Mm.
But obviously there's a lot of situational and psychological, sort of pressures and forces that are at play there, and the bystander effect is one of them. And it is really interesting, because it says that the more people present at the time where something sort of needs to be done, like, let's say there's a car accident, like, the more people that are there to witness it, the less likely someone actually will step forward to help. Which is sort of the opposite of what you would think, because you would imagine, well, there's
Mm.
more options for people to help here, so
Mm.
surely someone's going to step forward. But the reality is that, we might be concerned for our own safety. We might think that there's someone else present who probably could do a better job than us. Because if it comes to doing some serious first aid, or like,
Yeah.
response, I'm not sure what the term is,
Yeah.
but like, it would be really easy to be like, I don't want to mess this up.
Mm.
Surely someone here is first aid certified or something like that.
Mm.
um and again, yeah, like, I'm not here to judge anyone for not acting, because I don't know it
Mm.
that I would,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of risk involved. Like, really, and risk is a tricky thing, because it's perceived differently by different people, and there's different levels of risk
Mm.
and different types of risk entirely. It might be financial risk, it might be risking your mental health, it might be risking yourself physically. It's really easy to think of, like, running into a burning building, but like, like, it might be a situation where someone is in public and sees someone being accosted or something, and they want to step up, but they've got a trauma involved, and to them that's a really huge, like, risk on their mental health or something
Mm.
like that.
Mm.
I don't know. There's loads of reasons behind why we wouldn't. I think all of us are a little bit overly optimistic about what we would do in cases
Mm.
of emergency. And then, there could sort of be a level of shock as well involved, depending on what the situation is.
Mm.
Or and yeah, there's so many different things that really could play a factor. um Say you see a car accident, and you're, a mom or a dad, and you've got young kids, and you're like, well, I don't want to go and get hurt, because what happens after, there's just
Yeah.
loads of possibilities for why we might not. They've found that, because there's some really intelligent and rad people that are, studying why is it that certain people do act heroically, and
Yeah.
why is it that some people can break past these barriers and things like that. And one of the things that they found is that empathy is a big part of it. They found that people who are more comfortable out of their comfort zone, which sounds like the opposite, but people who are comfortable standing out, they are less impacted, according to what I've learned, to things like the bystander effect. Like those social pressures sort of don't necessarily affect somebody who's got like a foot tall bright green mohawk as much as they might affect somebody who dresses like a businessman every day. I don't
Mm,
know. But yeah, it is a really interesting thing,
mm,
and loads of us do think that we would do something, and I don't necessarily think we should beat ourselves up if we don't,
mm.
but it would be nice to live in a world where people were a little bit more active when there was heroic action to be taken.
Yeah, when I talked about before, living a good life and practicing kindness and practicing empathy, and hey, this needs to be done, and maybe I could do something about it, and then building something to do
Right.
something about it. And I think if more of us focused on the safer, more
Hmm.
planned heroic acts, we would build a world, where there's, well, one, we're more. This is only my opinion. There's no research behind this, but this is my thoughts
Totally.
on it.
Yeah. No, I'd
Um,
love to hear it. Let's hear it.
we would build a world where it's more practiced. We're practicing that muscle, and so when we do have to step out of our comfort zone, there we are. We're already there. We're already practicing it. But also,
Right.
we more of a tipping point where more people are saying, I can make a difference. I can step up. I can change things, and I'd love to see a lot more people practicing planned action, whether you call it heroic action or not, just
Right.
plan
Right.
to make a better world. But I guess there's so many reasons why they're not. But I think that if we just got a reason why I don't think I can, I reckon
Right.
piff that reason out the window and
Yeah,
just.
throw it right out the window.
So you're also the vice president of the Hero Imagination Project.
I am the Heroic Imagination
Oh,
Project.
sorry.
But
So tell me about that. Like, what is the project about? What does it do? Who does it serve? All that kind of stuff.
absolutely. So the Heroic Imagination Project is a nonprofit organization based in San Francisco. It was founded by Dr. Phil Zimbardo, who did the Stanford Prison Experiment in the 70s. And then later on in his life, with another gentleman called Zeno Franco, wrote a paper called The Banality of Heroism,
Mm,
which sort of led to the nonprofit later on. The banality of heroism is an idea that I believe they were sort of inspired by something called the banality of evil, and it essentially it said any of us are capable of doing evil depending on the situations we found ourselves in and the
mm,
pressures that we found ourselves under. And then Phil and Zeno, they wrote a paper called The Banality of Heroism, which is essentially the same thing, just flipped. So,
mm,
anyone is capable of heroism depending on the circumstances they find themselves in and the pressures they find themselves under.
mm,
Um, so I read that and I was like, that's really interesting. And that paper sort of led Phil into starting HIP is what we sort of call it for short. And yeah, so what we do is we do research on everyday heroism. We do trainings. So schools, teams, businesses, organizations will bring us in to do sort of what we call hero training. And it has a lot to do with, the bystander effect or just sort of things like that. It's
mm.
kind of similar to like leadership training, but it's just kind of in its own segment.
So how has cementing yourself, now pardon the pun there, but cementing yourself in the hero space had an impact on your life?
It's opened up a lot of opportunities. I've always felt pretty comfortable speaking, and I've had opportunities to go and speak in schools and things like that, businesses since then. I spoke at the House of Lords in Parliament in London.
Wow.
Actually, it was 5 years ago today that I spoke
Wow.
there. Yeah, what a coincidence. That's so funny. I saw the Facebook memory this morning and was like, wow, but I was still half asleep.
Wow.
Um, and that was a really random thing. I was out doing asphalt one day and I was just sweaty and filthy and miserable and terrible. It was amazing. And I was riding in the truck with my dad I got a message from Matt that said, "Hey, you're not going to be in London next month, are you?" And I was like, "No, no, what? No, why? No." I was like, "No, why? What's up?" And he was like, "Well, we just got invited to speak at the House of Lords to promote our event and try and find sponsorship for our event that we're going to be hosting there next year in London." And I was like, "Whoa." Because so I was like, "Holy shit." And my dad was like, "What?" And I was like, "I just got invited to speak at the House of Lords." I'm covered in asphalt, by the way. Like I am filthy. And he's like, the like in London?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Are you gonna do it?" And I was like, I don't have money for a plane ticket right now." And he had weirdly enough been to the casino that morning. Our dad was a monster blackjack player. He was really good at it. And he was like, "Well, how much would it cost you to get to London?" And I was like, "I can get there for $500, get there and back. I can do that. I know how to do that." And he was like, "Cool." And he just pulled $500 out of his pocket and handed it to me. And he was like, "Go speak at the House of Lords." And that was one of the coolest things my dad ever did. It was rad. Yeah. And yeah, it's taken me to Australia, which gave me the opportunity to visit New Zealand. We've already talked about all of the amazing people that I've gotten to meet, but
So, what advice would you give to anybody who wanted to become an everyday hero, either by starting a project to make a better world or simply by choosing to do good?
if you're trying to do a project, say you're concerned about the people in your community who don't have a home, right? Um, I guarantee you there's loads of projects already happening. And honestly, instead of competing with them, maybe find a way that you can help them. Or maybe you can find a way to you sort of reach out to, if there's multiple groups, I- a lot of times I think people like the idea of starting a project. And for some people, that's totally the way to go. But I would always say that it's worth checking out other organizations in that field prior and sort of getting introduced to people and getting some experience and finding out if it's really for you before you sort of delve into opening a charity or a nonprofit or something like that, a charitable organization or whatever, because it's a lot of work and it's really hard. And there's a lot of times where you question why you're putting all of this work into something that a lot of people don't even really get what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's really defeating. So I would say, first things first, if you want to start a project, I would find people doing something similar and get involved with them for a year or maybe two and see how you feel about starting your own project after you've helped with one for a while. If you want to be an everyday hero, um, check out what we're doing at the Heroic Imagination Project. Check out a lot of the talks from the Hero Roundtable, which you can find us on YouTube. There's loads of great talks on this exact topic. I would work on trying to find connections between yourself and people that you don't necessarily think there's any connections between, but try and find the common ground and work on that as a thought exercise. I think that, well, it's been proven that when we see a similarity or like a shared tribe is like kind of what a lot of people like to call it, between us and someone else, we're much more likely to stop and help them. Whereas if we saw ourselves in sort of two different groups, we're much less likely to. And the reality is we're all people. So if you can't see us all in the same group from that alone, then you definitely need to start checking your own thought processes.
Now, where can people find you?
So I'm on Twitter as Tej Sartor, TeejSartor. I'm on LinkedIn as Thomas Sartor. But yeah, aside from that, the Hero Roundtable or Hero Roundtable on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. If you could go subscribe to our YouTube, that's sort of my little pet project right now, so it would be really helpful. Facebook, all the normal spots, the Hero Roundtable, and then Heroic Imagination Project on Twitter and Instagram. Those are my current projects. And if you're in Southeastern Michigan and you're listening and your home ever floods or you find mold, call up 1-800-WATER DAMAGE of Southeastern Michigan and ask for Thomas, because that's what I do as my day job right now. I'll come help you out. That's where you find me.
I love it. You're doing a wonderful, wonderful job for the world. And, I love it. Love it so much.
Thanks so much, Karen. I really appreciate it. That's very nice of you to say. And to see that Get Off the Bench is going really well. I'm super excited about all of this. And yeah, really great talking to you too.
You too. All right. Well, I'll catch you soon.
Absolutely, Karen. Thank you. Bye.